Alright, hey everyone, and welcome back to another Angular video. This is where we're going to start lesson 2, and what we're going to cover right here real quick is we're going to cover some reactive form information, and we're also going to cover some binding. So before we get into the reactive forms, I'm going to do binding first. It's the shorter one to start with. So let me go ahead, hop into the HTML here. Oh yeah, we're already there. I'm gonna show you some binding. So you may have noticed before when we did our directives, we did square braces. So now what square braces are is that they set up incoming binding, as in they take information from the JavaScript or the TypeScript and bring it into the HTML to use it for attributes or other, right? So the other type of braces that we could use are the round braces. And the round braces, like for example here, they set up outgoing binding. So the information in the HTML is being sent into the JavaScript or the TypeScript to be used. And when we do that, we can actually access the JavaScript variables and functions and other things from within these double quotes. So this, for example, is a click event. Usually our outgoing bindings will be events, and this is a click event being used on this div that I've given a class button to. So what this does is that whenever it's clicked, it's going to run this and see if the form is valid. If the form is indeed valid, if form.valid is true, it'll reset the form. Otherwise, it'll run this complain function and say this string right here. It's going to put out this string into the console. So just to reiterate, outgoing binding is your round braces. Incoming binding is your square braces. What incoming binding does is it brings information from the JavaScript or TypeScript into your HTML. What outgoing binding does is it takes information from your HTML and then it brings it to the JavaScript or TypeScript, right? So now that we've brushed over binding, and that's actually most of the information really, that's really the bulk of the information right there, the basics, the fundamentals, we can head into reactive forms. So as you can see right here, I have a form setup. It's pretty big. It's a pretty big form. A lot of information in here, so big form, right? And I have used binding to assign the form group attribute this variable form. So let's get into what that is. So this is a part of creating a reactive form in which you use variables in tandem with the HTML so that the Angular and the HTML can communicate and manage the form, right? So the form is able to react to the Angular and the Angular is able to react to the form. So the first thing that you need to do to set that up is that in the module you prepare the Reactive Forms module. So right here you can see we imported the Reactive Forms module, and then right here in our imports the Reactive Forms module is there. That makes sure that the direct children of this module will be able to access the Reactive Forms module information. And one of the things that gives you access to is what we just saw right here, the form group attribute. So it sets up several attributes on our HTML elements or tags in preparation for reactive form making. So let's go into the component here so I can show you a bit of what's going on. Now this is the form variable that was mentioned earlier. So what you do is you create a form group. So as you can see here, I've created a form group, and the constructor of that form group accepts an object. Now that object should contain a name representing each field in your form, right? Each field in your form, and it should provide a default value and a validation through the usage of a new form control. So each of these represents a field, and each field is given a form control, and each form control is given a default value, an array of validators. So next, So once we have that set up, actually let me go a bit into what the validators are doing. So when you have a validator, you can access certain methods that would allow you to provide information such as pattern, right? So the pattern one allows you to provide it a regex that defines what the field should look like when parsed as a string, right? So this regex here is for names. All it really does is that it makes sure that the first letter is a capital letter, and then it accepts the following characters to be common letters, one or more, right? So it doesn't accept spaces. It doesn't accept, for example, apostrophes, which of course, so this wouldn't accept every name. It's just a basic thing I set up for the example. So there's quite a few complex names that wouldn't be accepted here. For example, let's say your name has a hyphen in it. This would not pick it up as an actual name. Let's take a peek at some of the other things that you can use a validator with. So validators dot compose, and compose multiple validators into a single function. Interesting. So that one does that. Compose asynchronous. Okay, and that one compose, it does the same thing as compose, except it does it asynchronously. This one, oh, validators email. Oh, this one makes sure that the value passes an email validation test, right? This one ensures that it's below a max number. This ensures it's below or equal to, actually below or equal to a max number, below or equal to a max length, you know, vice versa, min length. Null validator. So let's see what a validator that performs no operation. Interesting. Pattern which we've used there, required, which we've used right here, and what that does is it makes sure that the field has a value. If it doesn't have a value, then it will be invalid. Then required true. Let's see, it requires the controls value be true. Oh, I see. Interesting. We won't touch on this one, we'll leave that be. So let me go ahead. So for example, we have right here an email field. It's customized, this one, right? Because in our form, I'm going to show you later, but there's a substitute for the end of the email, which is usually the at area. So I customized the validator for that. But if we were accepting a regular email, instead of having this pattern here, we could have just went validators.email, and it would have validated the email for us. And that is how you set up your validators, right? Very nice, very streamlined, convenient. Alright, so that aside, let me go ahead and check up on here, make sure everything's back in place, because I'm getting an error right now. Something happened to the name validator. Oh, there's an extra. Oh, when did that happen? Yeah, accidentally deleted something there. So yeah, the whole idea of the reactive forms is that you have these form groups, form controls, and of course there's also the optional form array. And what these do is they allow the Angular and the HTML to communicate, particularly concerning a form and how to manage it. So these validators are set up, and our form over here, how does it use them? Well, first of all, we have to make sure we assign the form group to the form, and then on each input we assign them to the name that we've provided in here. So the first name input, we have it right here. This is the first name input, right? First name. And we know that we provided a field, a property here, fname, in order to control it. And what we do to access that is we use the form control name attribute, again provided by the Reactive Forms module, and we provide it with a string that provides the name of that property that we want it linked to. So now that we've done that, they're connected in the way that this default right here is what would show up in the field, and whatever shows up in the field would be assigned to this default. So just to show exactly that that's what's happening, I'm going to set that as the default value for first name, and then let's bring up the program. And as you can see, the name Simon is now currently in it. Alright, and then if we go back into the code, here and we change that, let's say change it to Sarah, and we go back, now it says Sarah. So you can see that they're binded together. So the reactive forms allows you to bind that information, but it's not done with regular binding, because as we covered before, regular binding is done with square braces and round braces, but this automates a lot of that for us, so that all we need to do in order to have them binded is we assign the form attribute form group to the variable of the form group in question, and then we use form control name to tell it which fields connect to which properties on that object. So I've set up this so that whenever, let me bring it here, whenever the form is valid and you click on this button, what it does is resets the form. So it resets the form. As I said, the form variable that represents the form group and the HTML form are now binded. They are now one. So when I access this reset function right here, it's going to reset the form in the HTML as well as the one in the JavaScript. And of course, here's the complaint function. So let's fill it out a bit. So let's set up an email address here. Let's use random password. Alright, and then let's press next. So first of all, let's bring up the console as well. Alright, so right now we wanted to complain at first, so I'm gonna set my first name as a number, and boom, there it complains, you effed up the form. And if we correct that and we do it, boom, it resets. So you can see the validation went through. So it's easy, 1 2 3, your validation sticks, and you can reuse this stuff. So it makes managing your forms a lot easier than if you were to handle them each instance one at a time. So that's how Reactive Forms works. And, in the next video, I'm not sure what I'm planning to cover immediately next yet, but I will drop it soon enough, either tomorrow or the day after. And I'll be making sure not to make the videos too long from this point on, because if you remember, the first one was 40 minutes. I'm going to be trying to keep them at a 15-minute standard from this point going forward. And as usual, if you have any feedback for me, please drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped.